Hey, welcome to 10-minute or 22-minute or however many it turns out to be with who I'm talking to. Author Tidbits. Today I am with author Kasey Stockton, one of my besties. They're all pretty much my besties because I'm just popular.
I'm the bestiest
You are
bestie.
the bestiest bestie. Anyway, so today we are going to talk a little bit about Scotland, Scottish heroes or Scottish heroes. We may get some heroines in there. I'm not sure if I care about them as
Eh,
much, but we all read it for the men. At least we do. I don't know. Maybe men read them for the women. I don't know. Maybe that's for another episode. Who knows? But
part two.
yes, exactly. So anyway, we're going to talk a little bit about that today because Kasey has written a whole series. Is it done yet? I know you
Yep.
just released a third, and is that
The
the last
third
one in
and
the series?
final. Yeah,
Cool. Of Scottish Highlanders, right? Are they
yes,
Highland? Okay.
they are.
And so I thought she might be kind of a good one to talk to about this, right?
Yeah, I know a thing or two.
You know a thing or two. I don't. I've looked into Scotland and then I go, oh, this is going to take a lot of time. And so then I move them and they now go to Northumberland or someplace close to Scotland
Basically the same thing.
so that I don't have to go there. Because, even their whole, the clans and how their nobility was originally set up is so totally different.
hmm
So it's a little daunting for me.
Well, and they're
So,
not even, I feel like from my research at least, it's like
mhm.
what worked for one clan wasn't necessarily the rules for the others. So even amongst all their clans, there's still like so many nuances to their laws
Yeah.
and stuff.
Which can be good and bad, right? I mean, it
Yeah.
can be good because then you're not set in stone. You can kind of have your clan maybe have some different rules, but it
Yeah.
also is a little bit hard because it leaves you open, I think, a little bit more, maybe
hmm
for people
Well,
to.
yeah. Or people are familiar with one set of rules, so they
Mhm.
think my rules are wrong when, I found it
Yeah,
somewhere else. So
right.
it's tricky.
Yeah. Okay, so let's start maybe by asking what is the difference maybe between like the Scottish gentleman or the Scotsman versus the English? I mean, their accent, right? They have like
Yeah.
a completely different accent. But what makes them like appealing for you to go into Scotland as opposed to just stay in England?
Well, I think it really comes down to the year, right? So like if you're pre 9 or 1746 or post 1780s, they can be in kilts, which I think is something a lot of people don't mind. But so that'll be like their dress will be different.
So there was like 40 years where they couldn't wear the kilt.
Yeah, after Culloden, when the whole Jacobite thing ended and
Yeah,
everything, there was the act of it's gonna not gonna think of it now that we're live,
that's okay.
but there was like a law that restricted Highland dress, so they couldn't wear like the plaid or they couldn't wear the kilts or anything. And then it was retracted 40 years later, but at that point, everyone was so used to they weren't used to wearing kilts anymore, so they didn't really go back to it. So kilts came back actually, it was like right after the Regency eras when they started really coming back. And it's
Mm,
because there was like a monarch. Was it the Prince Regent who went to Scotland and he wore a kilt and it kind of brought it back? So,
that's so interesting. Was it a way to kind of bring them in line after the Jacobite rebellion?
yeah, the Jacobite. So
Jacobite.
after like because they had been it was like what, 40, 50, 60 years of them the whole Jacobite thing, and
Yeah.
so there was a lot of things that they tried to do to like repress them and to stop it. And so after Culloden, they'd really like that's when they took most people's land. A lot of people went to the tower, and then it was like I can't think of the word, repression maybe. They were
Yeah.
trying to just like get as much of the Highland culture out as they could.
Yeah. That's so interesting.
Mhm.
So, because I mean, I I am a double emphasis for my history major, and one of them is in English history. But even still, I mean, I don't think of you don't think of the 1700s as them having those kinds of rebellions within, it seemed like that was more back in more like the 1600s, just after they came with, James and all of that. So it always still is like, whoa, that was pretty recently.
It really was. And to be fair, like the kilt, they were able to still wear it in the army. So like the Highland regiments would still wear kilts
Mm,
in those years. So kilts weren't like gone completely, but unless you were in the army. But
yeah.
yeah, no, it's like it was very like I don't know, it was very recent to have that kind of a battle.
Yeah. I mean, because it's not much older than the rebellion with the Americans colonies. We like to call it a revolution, but some might call it a rebellion. But you're
Depends on
looking
which
at a
side of the pond you're on.
yeah, you're looking at a similar time period. But I mean, I don't know. I don't think of them having those problems. Which I mean, really and
Yeah.
truly, there were problems with Ireland up until you know fairly
So
recently.
recently.
Fairly recently. So I'm not sure why it shocks me, but it does.
Yeah.
So, okay, so we've got the dress being different, which is always kind of cool, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So I totally just went off. So your original question, I have an answer to that actually. It was interesting because I found this during my research, but it talked about why Highland men are built the way they are is because of so Vikings came over, right,
Hmm.
to Scotland and pillaged and kind of took over, and that's where a lot of the Highlanders come from. Their ancestry is Vikings, and so like physically they're bigger people, but because
Mm,
the Highland area is so like
rugged.
the land is so rugged and everything,
Mm.
like they're whatever I cannot think of the word. So their like bodies literally they became these like rugged men because only the strong men like that could actually farm the land and live there.
Because
So
it was
they
physically taxing.
adapted. Mhm.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and so like people love Highlanders, I think, because they're always these like brawny, strong guys, and they're strong in like, mentally and emotionally and physically and all
Yeah.
the things. But it's like it was just cool to think of like, why that
Yeah.
is.
Yeah, well, yeah, because you think of Highland games and you have like the caber tosses and
Yeah.
all of it, and so that makes sense why they might be bulkier.
Yeah. Yeah,
I'm s-
and all those things. Oh, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
I was gonna say, because I had to my second book is all about, like, Highland games, so I had to do a lot of
Mm,
research, and I found it interesting that a lot of those, games
mhm.
came from necessity. So, like, the caber toss is because they had to, like, cross rivers, so they would have to throw a pole, like, lengthwise so that they could cross the river, and so it's not about how far you can throw or how heavy the pull is, it's about how straight you can throw it, that actual particular game, because it
Oh,
came from something they had to do to survive, which is
that's
interesting.
yeah, that is really interesting. It's not just kind of a it's not like what you think of for the tournaments that
Mhm.
they used to have in the medieval time where it was more about, you know, who was the best at. I mean, yes, they were
I think
about
it became that way.
right. I mean, it started because it was warfare, but who
Mhm,
was the best at warfare, but then they also kind of became this showmanship kind of thing. So, that's interesting.
mhm.
Which I guess maybe the Highland Games have kind of more turned into the showmanship also
Yeah.
as the
Well, and they
years
would
have gone
use
on.
them to, like, solve disputes or, like, figure out if they needed I think it's the whole thing started because there was some man who needed a message ran somewhere, and so he told everyone, "Run to the top of that hill and back, and the fastest one is my
My messenger.
personal messenger," and so it became like a competition to figure out who could do things.
How funny.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Okay, so when you decided to write your series, was it as much about the location or was it more about the events? Because yours centers a lot on the
The
no,
Jacobite
the
cause.
Jacobite, right?
Yeah.
So was it location or or was it the event that is what shifted it there? What was your
It was probably both. It was probably a good amount of both. Like,
yeah?
I've always been drawn to Scotland. I have a lot of Scottish ancestry, so that's probably part of why, and then,
Hmm.
um, I don't know, I love their accents, and I was watching Outlander, which I like to watch with a VidAngel
Filter.
filter because I just do. And that's my personal preference. And I had this idea while I was watching it for
Uh,
like a bounty hunter type story. And then that sort of just like snowballed into
yeah.
my series.
How storylines do snowball.
Yeah.
So when you first started it, were you intimidated, like because of the accents and the because
Yes.
as a writer we always hear, you only have to put the accent in once and then you'll just hear it when you read it. If you put
Yeah.
it in, then so you kind of have that in the back of your head. Was it one of those that was it hard for you to figure out what accent to put in, what not, how to handle the accent altogether?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it shifted a lot as I was writing, and it even shifted as I wrote additional books and I went back and
Mhm.
kind of edited the accent so it would be the same in all of them. But what I settled on, I'm really happy with because
Yeah,
I tried to keep it like I do understand the whole like readability and wanting people to
right.
just be able to read smoothly. So I tried to only replace words that were so close to the American word or the English American. I'm a writer. So close to the English word that it wouldn't be too different, like dinna instead of didn't. Like
Hmm.
I just tried to keep it like that. And I've gotten a lot of feedback that it worked. So
Yeah. I think it's a fine line because I am not a reader that as soon as I hear the accent, then it's always in that accent. Like it
mhm.
doesn't, I'm not, my brain doesn't work that way. So it's like for me, I want to have the accent to kind of help me remember that. I don't need it to be like spread through all of the sentences, but just things that are said every now and then that you go, oh yeah, that's right. They are Irish, they are Scottish, or you know what
Mhm.
I mean? So that's interesting. Because the dinner is the one that you see in a lot of the Scottish authors,
Yeah, and I think
at least that I've seen.
that's part of it too, is like choosing the words to replace that everyone else is choosing is good because
Yeah,
those readers who read Scottish are already going to be familiar with it
right.
anyway.
So it will keep with the readability.
Although I have had, like, a handful of people say they just can't. They get, like, a chapter in and they can't do it, and that makes me sad, but I don't wanna not write that Scots in there, so
Yeah. Which are those on audio?
the first one is I'm still figuring out the rest of the series.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear you on that one. Okay. So why do you think, which maybe we've kind of answered this, but why do you think they've become so popular? Because I will say I don't remember a lot of Scottish books until probably the last 3 or 4 years. And then it seems like now there's quite a lot of them. Have you seen a, I mean, is there something you can go, oh, I think it was is it a specific book, or do you just think the writer world's small and as we kind of talk, then people start getting ideas? I mean, what do you think? What's your
Well, I saw a comment recently that was like, "We need more Irish books. There's way too many Scottish books right now," and I was like,
is there a thing
"Where?" I'm not seeing them. Like, I feel like in our community, yeah, there are a good handful of Scottish books, but I don't feel like we're quite
overall?
overrun yet. I feel like
Yeah.
Ireland is the one who has like, there's a lot of Irish rom-coms, but, like, we don't have
Mm,
Scottish ones,
yeah.
and I don't know. So when I love Scotland, so I've looked
Yeah.
for like clean Scottish romance and it's like impossible to find. There are very few and I've read them all a dozen times now. But I think that with Outlander, kind of it brought back like
Oh,
like
yeah.
a love for Scotland, or it introduced a lot of people to Scotland. And
That's
then
true. I hadn't thought of that.
yeah, and our clean readers who there's a lot of Highlander books that are on the steamy side, but our
Mm.
clean readers don't always want that. So we're kind of, I don't know. I think that's sort of what opened us up to this.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of Highlander, but that you're probably right. It probably is. It's kind of like the gateway, kind of like Bridgerton
Yeah, it
tends
is,
to
I
be
think.
a little bit of a introducing people who may not have been Regency fans have
Mhm.
become Regency fans because of it. A revised version of Regency, but still, we'll take them all, right?
Yes.
Um, so now that you've finished this series, knowing that you love Scotland so much, do you think you're going to, I mean, do you have plans for another Scottish series? Or are you going to, or, I mean, because I think sometimes when we do projects like that, then it's sometimes feels hard to pull out and set it in another location. Do you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so do you have one or?
Well, I don't know. This series was so unique because I mean, I called it a historical fiction with romance in it because
Mhm.
there's so much of the historical fiction and there's a lot of points of view, not just the main characters.
Right.
It jumps around. So I've had a lot of people have an interest in another story with those points of view and everything. And I have two different Scottish story ideas, but they would require so much research that at this point I don't know when I'll write them. I
Yeah.
will, but I just don't know when.
It's hard, isn't it?
Yeah.
When you're doing something new. Martha and I were talking about that, the changing into a new era or, a new time period or a new country involves so much research that it gets
Yeah.
to be a bit daunting. Because, as you've got how many Regency books out?
Like
Like a
20.
dozen, more than a dozen. I've got more than, and so you kind of feel like I know this area. I'm
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
So then to have to, because
But
I've had
even
this with
then,
my medieval.
like I
Yeah.
was writing this morning and I was like, wait, what night is Almex? Like I could not remember what night of the week
Yeah.
Almex. So I'm like, you can do all the research. Like I did months of research for the Scottish one. And if I wrote another Scottish series, I'd have to read all
Do a
those
bunch
books
of the
again.
read. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's true because it all starts to, I was editing this book I'm doing right now, and I was like, when are they going to do this part? When do I get to this? And then I was like, oh, that wasn't even in this book. Yeah, forgot. I mean, they do all start. So yeah, I get what you're saying. Okay, so give me a Reader's Digest version of Regency versus Georgian, and then even within that, maybe Scottish versus English within those. Because I think from what I've seen, there seems to be a little bit less noticeable difference between Regency Scottish and Regency England,
hmm
where maybe the earlier Georgian, that's not the case. Am I right on that? Wrong? I could be
Yeah.
totally wrong on that.
No, I mean, their society was not that different from ours. Is that what you mean?
Well,
In the
like
Regency era?
from, yeah, like, because the Scottish seem to have more of the same feel as Regency England as Scottish as Regency
I think
Scotland. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think what it comes down to is kind of like what the class is of your characters. So
Mm-hmm.
if you're writing a duke in Scotland, it's not going to be that different from writing a duke in England, whether it's in the 1700s or the 1800s, I think.
Oh yeah,
I
that
think.
far back even.
But if
Okay.
you're writing like lower class or middle class, then that's where I think more of the nuances come in because it is different. There were different times.
Right.
So like my characters would not have worn shoes is what I was reading, which is like the point I always make, but like the women just didn't wear shoes. The women were not educated at all. Like even the daughters of chiefs couldn't read a lot of the time or things like that. They wouldn't educate them. They would go learn how to be a wife. So like that kind of thing I don't think necessarily translated over to England. So there are some differences, but I think that people in England would still wear shoes. Like even the poor people, they would. I've
Yeah.
never read that they wouldn't, at least.
Okay. Gotcha. So one other thing then. Help me know, what is the difference between your clans and your nobility?
Okay, well, Parliament, right? So your clan chief he's over the clan. So clan comes from the Gaelic word for children. It literally means like family,
Mm-hmm.
but your clan doesn't necessarily have to be like all of your extended family. Like I could join someone else's clan by marriage, or if I was a man or whatever, I could join their clan by swearing fealty to their chief
Right.
and living with them or whatever. So there's a lot of flexibility in the clans, but the clan chief was like your leader, and they had so much loyalty. Like their loyalty, the same way, British men would have honor and they would fight duels for honor and stuff. I think in Scotland it was like more severe, their loyalty and honor. And if they swore to their chief, that was it. Like there's
Right.
nothing that would break that promise, right?
Mhm.
Unless they were trying to two-time them or whatever.
Which
But
is a whole nother subplot.
it is, but possible. I mean, people did that.
Yeah.
So, but then you get into like lords and stuff, and a lot of that is it's just different. Like they're part of a clan probably, but they're the lord of this land or whatever, and they would help with lawmaking and that kind of thing in a different way.
Because that I think is one of the things that has always like baffled me. Because in my head, the clansman or the head of the clan, you would have become when they switched over, or when they brought in nobility. That's who would have become the nobility, right? Because most of your nobles started out as being over the land and over the people. Like most of your lords were controlled the city or the town that was by them and all of the lands around them, and they took care of all the people, which sounds like what the head of the clans did.
Well, a lot of them were like a lot of clan chiefs were also lords. So
Were they?
but it's just not, there's
But
no requirement. Like they're
right.
still separate things.
Well, and I guess in part some of that could also come in because I would guess when England came in and kind of repressed and took over, there might have been that tendency to replace some of the lords with English lords. Is that true? Do you know? I mean,
I'm not as super familiar. I know the Union happened in like 1700 something, 6
Yeah.
or 7. So at that point, that was a huge reason why the whole Jacobite thing got spurred again for the 1715 rebellion
Mhm.
and a few more times after that because they didn't want the Union. They wanted their own
Right.
parliament, their own king.
Right.
So I'm guessing there was a lot of England coming in and throwing their power around in that
Yeah.
time.
Okay, so that's interesting because I mean, I know you can start to see a lot of when you have a Scottish lord that they also might have English titles.
Yeah, I know.
And so,
And it's too much for me to, I haven't even gone into that.
so
Because
okay.
we have like laird of the manor. So the laird is not a lord either. Like I have a laird and
Uh-huh.
he's just like, he's not even a landowner. His chief owns the land, appointed him to like look over the people there. And he is just kind of like in charge of this house.
So he sounds more like a bailiff or a steward.
Kind of, except he has a title. So the
That's
whole thing's just like,
which is why I don't write Scottish. You just reaffirmed my decision.
but I also kept it easy. Like I could have thrown titles in there and I just thought I have so much in this series. I don't
Going
even
on
want to.
anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, that's one of the things that like when I read, I'm like, okay, the head of the clan. So why do they not call him a lord? Because I always assumed he would be, but it doesn't necessarily make it that way.
No, he's chief.
Well, and my guess is that as much as the English may have wanted to stamp out the clans, there's no way you really can do that, right? I mean,
No,
they're going to stay together.
They did do a lot to the culture of it, but not like to get rid of the clan. You can't get rid of the clans. That's like families.
Well, that's what exactly. That would be like stamping out family. So it's interesting. Okay. Well, you've answered questions and created more.
You're welcome.
So you get to be the 24 minutes.
Oh no.
But it's been awesome. I appreciate you coming. Anything else you want to tell us about Scotland? I mean, you have been there numerous times.
Yeah, and it's so beautiful. It's actually really interesting, something we noticed because on an author trip we took a few years ago, we like drove up from London all the way to like the Isle of Skye. We did like a big road trip, and it was fascinating when we went through northern England. We were like, man, this looks like what we expect the Highlands to look like. And then we crossed the border into Scotland and it looked like straight England, like the rolling hills. Like it wasn't rugged. It was so beautiful. And we
Because
were
that's
like,
the lowlands, though, right?
yeah, the lowlands. They didn't look like what we'd expect Scotland to look like.
Hmm.
And then you get up into the Highlands and everything. But I was just like, it was kind of funny how it was
Yeah,
switched like that.
that is. That's interesting. I've been to Scotland, but I've really only been to like Edinburgh and
Yeah.
the main ones. Because we didn't rent a car, so we were just Brit railing it and knew no better, you know, knew nowhere else to
So worth
go.
visiting though, still.
So I know it's on the list. It's on the list. Although I might have to stay there for like 3 months to see everything I want to see. But
Yeah, for real. So many castles.
yeah, so my hope is I can get to the point where I say, let's go see a castle, and my kids cry.
Yeah.
Hashtag goals.
like Martha.
Yeah. So anyway, all right. This has been awesome. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having
And
me.
we'll come up with some other topic and we'll talk again.
All right.
I always love talking to you. So anyway, all right, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you later. Bye.
Bye.